Thanks everybody for coming today and helping out the Merit School with this function. This is something. No, you're welcome. We're going to totally improvise this because we've never done anything like this, but I thought it'd be a fun opportunity for you guys to get close to these guys a little bit, at least on a bass sense. So I hope you enjoy it, and let's go. This is Alan Gulcher. He's an author and writer for Bass Player Magazine, amongst other things, and he'll be moderating today.
Was everybody at the show last night? I don't know about you guys. I kind of felt the bass was a little low in the mix. My opinion. Honor to be on stage with you guys, first of all. So it was an honor to hear you guys play last night. So once again, can we have more love? The first thing that I kind of wanted to ask you guys, and I'm sure you've been asked this a million times in interviews before, how and why did you start playing bass? Be as elaborate as you want. We'll start with Daryl.
It was one of those, for me, it was one of those weird things where I saw somebody playing who was like a kind of bigger kid in the neighborhood who was, who I kind of looked up to, and I saw him playing, and it just hit me like a shot that this was what I wanted to do.
What hit you? Like, what exactly about the instrument?
He was playing, he was standing on stage, people were applauding, and I looked up to him.
So you think it was more kind of the performance aspect of it than the instrumental aspect of it?
I didn't know what a bass was at that time. So I guess it was, it was that, I don't know, I'll say that it was a performance aspect, but somehow there was something deeper. It was like I saw my life.
So at what point did you learn what the bass was?
When I walked up to him and said, will you teach me how to play the guitar? And he said, what do you want to learn how to play, the bass guitar or the lead guitar? And I said, what do you play? Because I really didn't know. I didn't know there was there was a guitar at the house, kind of acoustic Norma guitar at the house. And so I thought all guitars had 6 strings. I didn't know there was a 4-string instrument until he started teaching me on the Norma guitar and ignoring the top 2 strings.
All right, so at what point did you kind of realize this is my instrument? Not just I want to perform, but this is my instrument. The bass is my instrument.
When did I first
Last week?
Yeah. Last night, halfway through Bob's set, No, I think it was early on. It was really early on. It was probably within I don't know. I think I found out the day that I saw him playing. I really do. I think it was from the beginning. I felt something. I really just felt something.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people here, how many bass players are there here? There you go. And I'm sure when you guys first started playing, everybody's got a story about their first lesson, their first band. Give us a little taste.
My first lesson.
Yeah.
It hurts. Hold it down anyway. Hold it down. And the guy who taught me, still a very good friend of mine, his name's Angus Thomas. He taught me, the very simple version in the wrong key of "Thank you for letting me be myself." And yeah, that was my first lesson, and I just remember that it hurt to hold my fingers down. And he said, no, you got to do that. And I'm really glad that he made me do that, because it was, in a way, it set the tone for the lessons that we had, where he made me do what was necessary to really play solid and be a bass player.
All right, now talk to me about your first band.
First band, that was so I saw him in a talent show. I was in 3rd grade.
This is Angus.
This is Angus Thomas. I saw him in the talent show. By the next year, my brother and I had a band, and we played in the talent show the next year. And he rehearsed us, and there was more, I'm tired, it hurts. No, you gotta play it. I want you to be able to play it. If I wake you up in not? You know, so it was like he was tough on us, but again, it really set the tone. And we went on stage, and it didn't really matter. We knew the song so well that it didn't matter. There was no stage fright. There was none of that. We just knew the music so well. We were probably as well rehearsed as any band I've ever played with since.
And you won the talent show, of course?
I don't know if there was really a winner, but yeah, we blew it.
All right. So, Jerry, you can follow that up. Tell us the beginning. Tell us when you first picked up the instrument and why you first picked up the instrument.
Well, it depends on what instrument you're talking about.
The bass, of course. We're all bass geeks here.
When I was 8 years old, I started playing tuba. Yeah. And in grammar school, we actually had an orchestra. And I don't think Stephen King could describe what we sounded like. But we had, when I was 13, I went to junior high school, and I noticed that I wasn't getting enough from the girls that liked the tuba players, you know. So I started playing string bass violin.
So a common theme here is everybody started playing bass to meet chicks.
What's that?
Everybody started playing bass to meet girls.
To meet chicks.
Well, yeah. But I think it was more for approval, you know. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys.
No, me too, definitely.
But I could, you know, I loved approval, you know. I really wanted my parents and all my peers, I wanted the approval, and so that's why I started playing tuba and stuff like that. But
so when you switched to bass, well, how old were you and why?
Well, I was 13 when I switched to string bass. Mm-hmm. Well, I just told you why, you know. We had a really good music program, and I was right outside of San Francisco, about 30 miles from San Francisco. We had a junior symphony, and a really good music program. And so I started playing string bass, and I started playing in the junior symphony and stuff. But I started playing, going to clubs when I was like 14. And I started going to San Francisco. I'd lie to my mother and tell her I was going to spend the weekend with a friend, you know, and then go to San Francisco. And I met a piano player up there named Flip Nunez, who was great. He was the house player at a place called Jimbo's Bop City. And that was the place where everybody went and played Miles, John Coltrane. Everybody went to, after hours, to Jimbo's Bop City. And so it was Flip Nunez that there were any local bass players that were happening, you know, so I got the chance to do it. I never played with any of those guys then, you know, but when there wasn't anybody else in there playing it.
So you were playing jazz at that point?
Yeah.
Like straight ahead, bebop stuff?
Straight ahead bebop, yep.
And when did you kind of branch out, if you will?
Well, I didn't get an electric bass until probably till I got out of the Navy. I went in the Navy music program, Navy School of Music, and played tuba and string bass and stuff in the Navy. And that was a great thing because it was big bands and stuff. And so I got out of the Navy about 1962, and that's when I got my first electric bass. Mm.
Was it love at first pluck?
What's that?
Was it love at first pluck?
You know something, it really was. You know, to tell the truth, I bought it because some of the gigs that I was doing when I got out of the Navy, I played with a deaf accordion player for a while. I'm serious. I got out of the Navy and I didn't have anything to do, and there was this guy named Tony Novello. He's a fairly famous accordion player. He was with a group called the Three Sons, and they had this Twilight Time. But he got encephalitis and he lost his hearing, so I did cane and hat routines with him, the soft shoe. It was really funny, you know. And but I used the electric bass in that, and as I came along, you know, I got into it more, you know.
Bob, your turn.
Okay.
Rock the mic.
Question being,
When you first started and why?
when I first started playing, I had some buddies who I played Little League Baseball with and played in a basketball league with, I was about 14. And they had a band. There were two bands in our neighborhood. And there was one band that had two guitars, bass, and drums. And then my buddies had a band. They had two guitars, drums, and a guy who played, remember those chord organs? That they didn't even plug into an amplifier. They plugged into the wall and had two little speakers in front and had the chord buttons. And he played that and sang. So they didn't have a bass player. So I just took it upon myself. They weren't looking for one either, because I don't think they knew they needed a bass player. Like one of the guitar players played kind of low down, kind of like bass parts and would play a little rhythm at the same time. He wasn't that advanced to where, it was sounded like two guys. But I kind of just said, hey, if I buy a bass, can I be in the band? And they pretty much ignored me. So I took it upon myself to, I looked in the want-ads and found a bass for $50. And I bought that, and then my dad bought me an amp, and they were both St. George Japanese amps. Japanese amp and bass, and I took it upon myself to kind of, I had a lot of records. I was always buying records. I shared a room with my older brother, and we were buying records from the 50s, the Fats Domino, Little Richard, and early Elvis, and all kinds of records, doo-wop bands. And so without really knowing that I knew what a bass, I didn't really know what a bass was, but I guess I'd been listening to music long enough. When I got the bass and started to decipher what the bass did, maybe it came to me not quickly, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know an F from an E. So I bought one, and I kind of started learning my way around the neck a little bit. I'm still learning that.
So you didn't have any teachers or anything? You were just all you?
Well, I did. There was my dad had a cabinet shop on this Pico Boulevard in L.A., in West L.A., and there was a little neighborhood music store a few doors down from him. And I went and took about 6 lessons from him. He wasn't a bass teacher. He was kind of an old-time jazz guitar player. And he gave me chord charts. First, he gave me a chart with the neck. And he just said kind of, where all the notes were. And because I didn't buy a book, I could have just bought a book to do that, but, paid some guy to tell me that. And he was way older than me. He was an older man, but he was probably, in his 50s.
Oh, my God.
And I was 14. Oh, my God, he was old. But, he gave me a chart, and I pretty much, did my homework and learned the notes. That's an F, sharp, D, and just kind of committed to memory. And then he gave me some chord charts to follow, and he would play guitar and like all these, and I had like a couple Beatle albums already, and he gave me a couple Beatle songs, and I already went, well, that doesn't sound right. He had all the wrong like jazzy chord inversions, to Beatle songs. And so I lasted about 6 lessons to learn enough how to get around the neck, and it did give me a little bit of a foundation, but I pretty much just listened to records and picked out what the bass player was doing, but I never really was good enough to copy the parts exactly. So I kind of made it my own.
It probably gave you a little more of your own style.
Well, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I couldn't copy him because I don't think I was good enough. My ear wasn't developed enough to exactly copy it note for note.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Duck, would you like to share with us your tale of woe?
Well, Steve Cropper lived about a block from me, and he was playing guitar. And another buddy of mine, Charlie Freeman, who's gone now, but both they had a band together, and they had 2 guitars and a drum. So I was trying to play guitar and getting nowhere with it. And one day, I went and heard it was Hank Brown and Midnighters were in town. And I heard them, and I said, man, that's what I wanted to do. And then I heard B.B. King, Sweet 16, and I said, I can do that, I think, So I got a K bass. I got a K bass and a K amp, and we had a band called the Royal Spades, and it finally changed into the Marquee Group that did last night. And I don't know. And then I used to stand in the window a music store, OK Houck music store, in the 50s, and about 57, and I saw this Fender P-bass hanging there. And I said, now, if I get that, I will be a pro. I mean, I said, I know it'll make me a better bass player. You know, if I get that. So,
And did that work out?
I don't know, but and my dad, tell you the truth, didn't want me to. We had a guy in Memphis named Sid Maker, played guitar with Bill Justice. Well, he died of a drug overdose. And my dad just told me, he says, you're going to be a junkie just like him if you do that. So he didn't really want, but my brother, Charlie, I wasn't young enough to get a credit application or anything, so my brother co-signed for a bass for me. He brought me that Fender. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we all owe a debt of gratitude to him.
Yeah, you bet.
Joe, would you like to tell us how you first picked up the instrument and why?
Well, same reason Duck did. I never knew that. I was playing guitar in a country band in Las Vegas in 1958 with another guitar player who happened to be Roy Buchanan. Oh, yeah. So one of us one of us needed to change the bass, and he played a lot better guitar than I did, so I was it. And from one night to the next, I was guitar player, then bass player, and it stuck. Cool. And I guess I'm glad it did.
So at what point were you like, I am a bass player? This is what I was meant to do.
I'm still not there. I didn't know anything about playing the bass. I knew how to play the guitar. And so it was all the same. That's how I stuck with the pick. And I didn't know I played a lot on the middle two strings. I didn't know the G string looked strange, you know, and I knew it wasn't E. So I stuck there a long time. When I finally found the G, and hardly ever played on the low string. I didn't like the way it sounded.
Cool. Thanks, Joe. We're going to move on now. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me just tell a quick story about one of the funniest stories I've ever heard about how a guy started playing bass, and this is Joe B. Malden, who was a bass player with Buddy Holly and the Crickets, and they all lived in Lubbock, Texas, you know, and so I asked Joe B. one night how he started playing bass, and he said, well, he said, I told my mom I wanted to play bass, and so she got me one and a guy to teach me, and he said, I went to one lesson, I came home, and my mom said, what'd you learn? And he said, dum, 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 dum. Oh, great, you know, that's wonderful, Joby. So then the next week, he went back for another lesson, he came home, his mom said, well, what'd you learn this week? And he said, I learned bum, 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 bum. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. So the next week, she asked him when he came home, what he'd learned. He said, oh, hell, he said, I quit that stuff. I'm going on the road with the Crickets.
Thanks, Jerry. That was awesome. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is you guys gig so much in the studio so much. I don't know how much time you get to practice, but I'd like to talk about your practice habits, past and present, like what you do to practice, what you've done, and what you think they could do.
That P word, it's a dirty word now. I played. I practiced, you know, there were a couple of times here and there where, all summer I'd really practice or, for a period here and there, but I played. I went out and played with musicians. So, as far as advice, I would say that as much as you practice, you need to get out and play with musicians. That's, because you're not, unless you want to just play by yourself at home. I mean, if that's your hobby and you want to just do that, then that's one thing. But if you want to play music with people, it's really important that you get out and do that. What was the other part of it?
I'm going to kind of switch up to the other part of it, which is, do you do any exercises, just hand strength exercises that you could show us?
There is one thing that John Patitucci, the other thing that I was going to say about practicing, and I heard this from Branford Marcellus, whose father, was an educator, jazz educator. In all seriousness, practice is what so few people are really willing to do. And it's the thing that will make, to make the difference, so it's, most people are not going to sit down and spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day really, learning a craft. And if you do that, then you will make yourself the standout. Excuse me. That's the first time that, I'm surprised that we all still have our teeth as close as we standing together.
I chipped mine once.
Did you really?
Yeah.
No, but I'm just like, the 5 of us have been together here since, for a couple of days now, and nobody's gotten smacked in the face.
Except me.
Well, okay, well.
Nice to meet you guys.
John Patitucci showed me this exercise where you hold down like this finger on that string, and then you use pull-offs. While holding that one finger down.
And I don't know if you can see, but it's his ring finger that he's holding down.
And then you switch up, and you hold that one down.
That's all.
And without this hand. And then you switch from that string to that string. And it really develops, after a while, you can really feel your hand burning, so it really does develop strength in that hand.
Lather, rinse, repeat.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
Is that the kind of thing you do like on a tour bus, bust out the bass? It's like, I'm feeling tight.
No, on the tour bus, you drink, right? Obviously not a bass.
Silly me.
No, anything when you want to warm up, when you warm up your hands before you play a gig or, something like that, or, when you're practicing.
Cool. Thank you. Jerry, do you have any practice tips you'd like to share with us?
I never practiced.
Never? Like even when you were younger? Or?
No, when I first started playing, especially string bass, I practiced a lot, And basically it was playing little classical things for the bass. Play string bass. I don't know if we have any string bass players here, but you play string bass.
Let's see show of hands. Are there any upright players here?
Excuse me. Yeah. Well, then you know if you guys who do it, but you learn the positions and stuff, and that's how you play a tune, hopefully. And so, but with electric bass, it's just like Daryl said. You start working enough, and pretty soon you keep your chops going if you're working. And I had a little bit of a dry period just before I came here for this thing, and I sat down and Dan sent me a CD of the things that he wanted me to play, and I hadn't played some of those since 1971 and stuff. And L.A. Woman is I played mostly with one finger, and so it's a sort of a. Doing that, I listened to the tape and started trying to play along with it, and I'm going. so I did. I have to confess. My wife just was agog because she's never seen me practice. But and it depends on how you play. What kind of music you play and stuff. If you play really, some really go-get-it kind of music, and you really have to go after it. Then you either have to play a lot or practice,
Yeah, so it sounds like what both you and Daryl are saying is it's all about gigging.
Yeah.
Well, not all about gigging.
Right.
That's a very, very, very important, component, because you can hear a musician. I call it guys with music store chops. It's like I could sit down next to a kid in a music store, and any normal person would say, "No, this kid's much better. Listen to him play." But if you set that kid next to a drummer, then it doesn't quite work as well because that's not what he's been doing. So I think I have to say it's both. I do think it is important to practice because, like I said, it's what very few people are willing to do.
Bob, talk to me about, because a lot of cats, they just don't practice it at your level.
Well, I'm guilty of that. No, but I mean, I'm with Daryl. You know, you go through periods in your life where you practice a lot, or some, and then, but you got to go out and play. I mean, when I was, maybe not when I started when I was 14, but when I was 15, 16, before I could drive, I'd hitchhike to, like, when they had jam sessions, and I'd hitchhike and go. I couldn't get into these clubs, and I knew a few guys, and they'd sneak me in the back door, like little blues bars and stuff, and go in so I could, go, all night. So I could just go play, because, just like Daryl said.
They sound so much better than
Dan?
Anyway, it's just so I could go play, be in a playing position. Then you go home, and you might play with some guys that are playing some stuff that you didn't really practice. You go, and you might find a record that groove was on or something. I remember, when the Born Under a Bad Sign album came out by Albert King, I was Duck all over that. And that was, what, 67 or something?
Hell, I don't remember.
Well, that came out, and there was like some new grooves. Crosscut Saw. I'd never heard any blues band play that groove. And then pretty soon, everybody was playing that groove. And it's a real simple bass groove, but nobody played that. So, you'd go listen at home, then you'd go play. And playing was the thing, and it still really is. And then, you grow up and you grow older and you raise a family, and then you've got little kids running around, and I'm trying to practice here, and you can't really practice. So I go through stages of practicing, and I still, I sit down, and there's a couple, like, simple exercises I've been doing for 20 years. Well, I'll do something like just a major scale, I'll do it in every key up the neck, but I'll go,
Okay, we get it.
And just keep going, do it in every key, and all the way up and down the neck. And I'll do stuff like that to warm up, But that's about it, and do something in a minor scale maybe, but not as often. I listen to Latin records now, Latin and Latin jazz records.
Anybody in particular?
Well, I like Cachao, He's still he's like the Jamerson or the Dunn or, or these guys of that style of bass playing. But there's some new guys, Cachao Ito, who was in the Buena Vista Social Club, that guy. I guess he's Cachao Jr. or something. And then there's Oscar Cataya, who lives in L.A. There's some bad cats, they play from a different perspective. So I listen to that a bit. I don't play it very well, but I like listening to it and picking up some stuff.
I would like to say one thing about practicing. He was just playing scales. I think it's really important that even when you're practicing, like when you heard him play that was music he was playing. That wasn't just, it's like, I mean, who I think about when I play scales? I think about Pavarotti. How he would sing a scale, da, 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 da.
Right.
Make music when you play music. Even when you're practicing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you make music when you're practicing, then you'll be making music whenever you pick up an instrument.
Cool. Yeah.
Let me say one more thing, too. Like he was talking about salsa and Spanish music, Latin music. Another one that I really love, because there's no bass on it usually, that's really fun to play with, is Arab music. And you play it into different time things and stuff, and it's very soulful music. So I sit down sometimes just for fun and play with their just simple. You can smell the camel crap, when it's just duvecks and a oud and a guy with a whistle, or something like that. Just sit down and play with that, and that's fun.
I think that's a really good point you just made, which is practices, it shouldn't be a chore. It should be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that you should be able to come up with something that can, you don't want to be scared to practice. You want to get excited to practice.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I usually probably play what I did a little slower. It's probably nervous energy.
So you're just showing off right now?
Nervous in front of you guys, playing a little faster than I normally do.
Yeah.
Like the way he sang Pavarotti's version, I do. Because it's harder to play it slow in time, really, I think. been real fast in time.
Doc, can you talk about how you got to be?
Well, I must admit, I don't practice much now as I did when I was younger. But it's just like Darryl said. I went and played, and I was playing so much that I had to get some sleep, you know. And then when I started at Stax, we'd go in there at 10 in the morning and come out at 7 at night, and I'd get time to get a sandwich or something. Then I had to be at a club job from 9 to 1 at night. Wow. So I must say, today now I don't work as much as I used to, but I do try to keep my chops up, as they say, I guess, and but I just kind of like that. Go all up and down the neck and just, every fret. Just something like that. And then I'll get actually what the music I'm supposed to be doing, and I practice to the music I play.
Before we get to Joe, when I first started playing, I was obsessive about the metronome. Mm-hmm. Do you guys spend a lot of time with that, or did you when you were younger?
You were what?
The metronome?
I had Al Jackson.
Yeah. All right. I think, well, about the metronome, it's not something that I've used, but just recently, I started teaching again a little bit. And a metronome is something that you can use. It's one of the tools that you use to gauge whether you're getting better or not. What I might suggest is you take something that's difficult for you to play. You set the metronome very, very low, and you try to play that at 50 beats per minute. Whether it be read something or practice something that you're having difficulty with, or something that you want to learn. Write down. I would say practicing. Set down some goals. What you want to accomplish over a long term and over a short term and over a day. You write that down. You come to it the next day. You go to 52. Or at the end of rehearsal, at the end of practice, you also want to write down whether you accomplished the goal or not. Okay, this is if when you want to get into the scientific part of how you're judging whether you're getting better or not. Then you go the next day, you go to 52. You try to do that. Was I successful? And you just and that way you'll have like this record, and be able to look back and see, okay, have I really gained anything on that? That's one way. That's one, kind of really scientific way of approaching things. So that's something that, though I did not do, I suggest, strongly for students.
Joe, anything you'd like to share with us about your practicing, either past or present?
I practiced more the last 2 weeks than I did my whole life trying to figure out what I did.
More than the last 2 weeks trying to learn what he did.
What was that?
I was telling Jerry what he said.
I say, yeah, need a megaphone. Yeah. But practicing, I don't know, it's being in the studio, like practicing for the gig. There's no such thing as practice for the gig. When you never know what you're going to run into in the studio. But practicing just for chops, not playing songs, just exercises to get the calluses in all the right spots.
Can you show us some of your exercises that you like to do?
Oh, sure. Just things, whatever's really hard, something, one of those you were doing, and all the friends. I came up with whatever that was.
We're trying to do
things like to stretch it, and it's, of course, the fresh gets. It's just nothing. It's that gives you and play every note as clear as you can to make your fingers hurt. And slow. So you get really stretching. And it works these muscles and besides your fingertips, just stuff like that.
Okay. A few years ago, I wrote an article for Bass Player called Practicing Without Practicing. and it was about what you do away from the instrument to improve your playing. Does anybody have anything that some sort of visualization exercise?
I walk every morning with my wife. She makes me do it. I hate it. I had to walk to high school, and I swore I'd never do it again. But anyway, I take those eggs, the rubber eggs, and when I'm walking, I squeeze those. And
both hands?
Well, I'll switch. I'll take one and then just switch switch it over.
Okay.
But I think it does help.
Anybody else?
Yeah, let me, there's another thing other than just practicing. And when I was really, there was a time when I was young, and I went to a club in Philadelphia. I was in the Navy School of Music, and I was 18 years old. And I went into a club, and my theory teacher at the school knew Thelonious Monk. And so we went to this club and heard Thelonious Monk, and it was just a trio. And they played a blues, one of Thelonious's things, and it was like, okay, so when I met him, my theory teacher introduced me to him, I said, because this trio, they played, there was all this space and stuff in it, Nobody ever rushed, they were playing together, man, and I was flabbergasted. I said, how did you do that, And Thelonious Monk said, you mentally subdivide it. 12/8 in your brain. And he told me, he said, when you first start doing that, you'll be thinking about it, But then, after a while, you stop thinking about it, but it's there, and you know where it's at, And he said, when you get that down, then you can start playing different fields with different people, And like, I don't know about if you guys have done much recording and stuff, but I've done sessions, where the drummer had one kind of a groove, And so I'd hear a bass part that I wanted to play on the song, and the drummer, he was so tight-ass that there wasn't room in it for me to do the bass line that I wanted to do, So what I recommend to people is, I'm just starting to teach my 12-year-old stepson, and what I recommend is to get a good drum machine and maybe make up a line or write parts that you want to play, and then put the hi-hat. It's real simple, but if it's going to be something like that where there's going to be a lot of space, then you can do it, and then you cut the hi-hat out after you've figured you got it out, and just have the kick drum maybe and some accents, and then see if you can stay with that kick drum. You know what I mean? And you can do that with any kind of feel. If you can open it up, you want to put something really back in the pocket, just subdivide it, You got the band, tell everybody, let the other guys in your band know what you're doing, and say, well, look, let's try this. And after a while, you stop thinking about it, and it's automatic.
There you go. Thank you, Jerry. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I see you all have these gorgeous Lakland basses, but being that Lakland is only 10 years old, you didn't always have gorgeous Lakland basses. Let's talk about the basses that you had, the ones you started with, and how you got to this bass. Let's start at the other end with Joe.
Well, I always played jazz bass, the 60, and never used another bass on anything. And Dan called one day. He'd seen an article or something. He called and wanted me to try one of his basses. He sent one down. Sounded great, but it didn't feel like that jazz, and I wasn't ready to try to make any adjustments. at this at this point. And, so anyway, we talked about that, and we wound up bringing my bass up, and we got it as close as possible to that bass.
So right now, basically, what you have in your hand is pretty much your dream bass from when you first started. It reminds you of childhood, if you will.
When what first?
This is basically the instrument that you first started on for all, the style, the way it feels.
Yeah, and I wanted that again, and nobody had one. I tried a lot of basses, and so they made me one.
Thank you, Dan. Duck, talk to me about your first basses and how you got to this
like
one.
I said, it was a K.
Right.
And then I got the P bass, and at 58, and then I had a 61 jazz bass, and at some point, the neck on the P bass just seemed getting a little big for me or something. So I took the jazz neck and put it on the P bass, and that's kind of what we've done with this. And but I tell you what, out of all, I've always said in interviews and stuff that 58 was a Stradivarius of basses, the Fender. But I tell you what, Dan does one hell of a job with these things, man.
Yeah.
He does.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob, you told us your first bass. How'd you get to this guy?
Well, whole series of basses. I started going on the road in around 1972, and I bought, after I got rid of that Silvertone, St. George bass, I got a new Fender bass. I bought a brand new Fender bass for $220 with case, I remember, at Bay Music in Santa Monica. I got that, and it really wasn't good. It was a 69 P bass. It had a big clunky neck, and it wasn't like the cool ones I had picked up in the store when I first started playing, which were like the 65s, 64.
Right.
So I only kept for a year, and then I found a 64 P bass, which I played. Really, that was my bass for a really long time. Then I started going on the road, and I became somewhat of a bass geek whore, kind of. It was kind of fun. I'd go off on my own, or one of the guys in the band. Or mostly everybody was too high; they didn't care. I was, but I got up anyway. I go to music stores and pawn shops and stuff. I started finding other little instruments, like Gibsons and Hofners and K's, and I started acquiring instruments. I liked playing them. They all sounded a little different. They all made me play a little differently. But I always came back to playing a Fender P bass pretty much. I got a 64 jazz bass. I went through all these instruments, and I have a lot of them still. And so yeah, I kind of acquired a lot of basses over the years, just kind of traveling. Just became. It wasn't an obsession. It was just kind of a hobby, something to do. It's like, I don't know, some people buy, collect baseball cards or something.
And you just collect baseball?
I don't really collect them anymore. I stopped about 20 years, 15 years ago.
So do you have a room that's just filled with instruments?
Well, I got closets full, my wife would like to put some clothes in, But I've got, couple closets and, a couple rooms full.
Cool.
I even rent a storage space, and I don't know why. So I'm an idiot. Some people can't part with stuff. I just have stuff. Well, which is my favorite? I got to say, I really love these new instruments without, Dan does a great job. These basses are great. I have a couple favorite old basses. I have a 64 P bass, which is what we kind of, patterned these after. And I've got a K bass from the 50s or early 60s that probably just like you had. They sound fantastic. And, my old jazz bass and one of these Lakelands. And I've got a couple Hofners that I like, and a Gibson Les Paul signature bass, which is kind of what inspired Dan's, I don't know if you know about his hollow body bass, but that and a couple
Mine's on the way from Korea.
What's that?
My hollow body's on the way from Korea.
Oh, yeah, they're great. So anyway, that's my bass arsenal. We can
Thanks.
go on and on, but I already have.
Now you, early on, were playing a lot of upright.
Yeah, upright was my first bass, but the first electric bass that I got out of the Navy, like I told you. Went to work for this Tony Novello, the deaf accordion player, and That race was, I believe, a 60, maybe, P-base. And I used that for a long time. And then I was working in that hotel. I was telling you, I was working in a hotel in Palm Springs, California with a trio. And we were singing for freshmen kind of harmonies and stuff and doing that. And our off date was on a Sunday, and I went into Los Angeles and came back, and the hotel was gone with all my equipment, everything, my clothes, burned up.
Oh,
yeah, I believe they torched it, you know. And so there I was, you know, and I'd always been a little bit leery of moving into LA, you know, because I really didn't know where I would fit in there, you know. So, but I figured, well, I don't have any, you know, why not, you know? So I knew one guy in Los Angeles. So I went there. He got me a job in a poker club in Gardena, California for $90 a week. And they found this old Japanese bass. It was old at that time. And the Japanese instruments at that time weren't refined as they are now, you know. And so I played that. I borrowed an amp. I worked there, and I played. Then finally, I got some money. I could buy a bass. I saw at the musician union. I saw there was a bass, a Fender P bass for sale for $100, and it was at a mansion up in the Hollywood Hills. You know, so I went up to this mansion and. Here are these guys. This guy came to the door, and his hair was like this, and I'd never seen any hippies, you know. And it came, and there was this real strong smell of smoke from this, and there was no furniture in this place, and there was a marble floor, and all of these stoned out hippies were sitting around a fire that they had built in the living room on the marble floor. Right? Obviously it wasn't their mansion, you know. So anyhow, so I paid them the $100 and that was like I can't remember. I think it was about a 59, something like that, you know. So I had that for a while. Then I was working with Billy Preston in Watts in 1965. And the Billy Preston Review, and he was 16 years old. His mother used to drive him to the gig every night, you know. He played Hammond and did James Brown impersonations, and had Sugar Cane Harris, a great violin player, man, was in the show and stuff. And but anyhow, on their off nights, the Watts Riots started, and I had my stuff at the club, and they trashed the whole club. I mean, just the whole. It was called the Sands, and it was like held about 500 people, I guess. And so that was the end of that bass, you know. So yeah. So I went through some of them, you know. And then when I was playing with Elvis Presley, I had an older P-bass after that. But when I was playing with Presley, somebody came up to me and told me that a security guard had a P-bass that his wife bought to play with a country band like in about 1961, 62, and did I want to see it? And so I bought that for $200, and that's the black one. If you ever see any of the Elvis films and stuff, that's that black one that's in there, you know. And so, and I still have that. I don't use it a lot anymore, but I still have it. But Lakland basses, you know.
Yeah.
Can I hog the mic just a second longer?
What do you guys think?
I was building a Japanese garden at my house up in the hills outside of Los Angeles, and I can't remember exactly when this was, but it was quite a few years ago. And it was hot, and I had a sweatband on, a pair of shorts and work boots, and I was just covered with dirt and stuff. You know, I was digging a foundation for a rock wall that I was going to build. And a truck pulled up in the driveway, and this guy, a UPS truck, and they brought out a box, and I thought, oh, you know, I wonder what that could be. So then I opened the box that evening, and it was one of the regular Lakland basses. No note, no nothing. And so I had no idea who it was. So I about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call. It was Dan. He said, "How do you like your bass?" Yeah, that's it.
That's great.
Talk to us, Daryl.
Let's see. First bass was some kind of weird copy of a Hofner Beetle bass. It didn't have a name on it. It was this weird kind of scroll, but it wasn't round. It was square, but
Just
not
like
at the
a
top.
barcode.
It was an
Yeah,
Echo.
it was, yeah.
Echo?
I don't.
EKO?
I didn't have a name on it. This is really like, and I was getting better, and, somehow I was able to talk my mom into getting me another bass. And we found, now meanwhile, I was like 9 years old and small for 9 or 10 years old. And we found a Fender Mustang, red Mustang with the white stripe.
Nice.
And that really, it fit, it fit perfectly for me. I was young and racing stripe, and it fit my hands, And I went from that bass to a PVT 40, which was, God knows, that's what I found. I don't know why I chose that instrument, but it was very heavy, but I was able to get a good sound out of it. It had a really two big, what looked like humbucking pickups. So, but I was able to get, my little Jocko sound, which is what I was into at the time. And I played that bass for quite a while until a friend suggested I buy this pre-CBS jazz bass, 1966 jazz bass with binding and blocks. And I had it didn't have frets on it at first. I had it refretted by a really good guitar luthier in Chicago, or in Evanston.
What's his name?
His name is Ed Reynolds. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I didn't even start playing it then, because I had grown attached to the T40, the PV bass. And once I was going out to a gig with Phil Upchurch, and I decided, let me just take that with me, and I'll play it for a song and see if it, I've never looked back, because it's a great instrument. I played that instrument, with the Stones, with Miles, with the Madonna, with everybody. That's been, an instrument that I played. And I got this friend, Angus Thomas, who I was talking to you guys about, who knew Dan, and he kept telling me, Dan, wants to, do an instrument for you. Well, about that time, I had been working on an instrument with a guy who had made me a couple of custom instruments. Aubrey Balgoshen is his name. And he had a company up until recently called A Basses. And he made some really beautiful instruments for me. One, a jazz bass-shaped thing that's carved top, no magnetic pickups. It has a Fishman pickup in the bridge. Beautiful piece of probably 100-year-old ebony fingerboard. But to get back to, so anyway, we're trying to do this production model with Aubrey, and we just decided that it was a little bit too expensive to try to do, the ads, because you kind of, what you learn, you got to have an ad in the bass magazines every month, and it's expensive. And we decided, well, maybe we'd be better off letting someone else take care of that. We'll see if we can, have the bass made by someone. And at the time, Fender had really dropped the ball. They, from the years, like he's saying about, in 69, was it that CBS bought?
67.
67, but there was still stock.
65?
Yeah.
65.
So there was still stock for, 4 or 5 years of stock. So we still kept getting good instruments from Fender up until, 1971, 72. There was still good stuff. After the 80s was like a real, it was really terrible for Fender. So I guess, shortly thereafter, Dan started making instruments. Mm-hmm. So we eventually went to Dan to make, to build our instrument. And
so you came to him sort of with your, dream instrument.
Yeah, we'd already, decided. There were a few other things that he added that were really cool. We didn't know that Fender didn't have a copyright on binding around the neck and blocks. So he added that, which was really great for me, because that comes from the instrument that I really love, the 66 jazz bass. Mm-hmm. And what we were trying to do when we, brought the instrument, when we started making the instrument that has become the Daryl Jones bass, we were trying to make an inexpensive alternative for a pre-CBS jazz bass. Now, you all know that, a pre-CBS jazz bass can cost you anywhere from $2,000 to $20,000. So what we were trying to do was come up with something that felt like that, had a great sound. We discovered that passive was something that was being overlooked a little bit in terms of sound. And also the fact that the pre-CBS instruments, the radius on the front of the neck, the roundness on the front of the neck, that they had gotten much flatter, and that was something like...
But I want to hear some stories. Tell me about Miles. Give me Miles Davis' story.
You were just talking about playing, someone was just talking about playing real slow blues.
Yeah.
When I auditioned for Miles, I walk into, it was very, espionage, I showed up, his nephew calls, says, listen, when you arrive at the airport, take a taxi, go to this hotel. Howard Johnson's on 56th and 8th, I think, 57th and 8th, yeah, something like that. Go there, wait for my call. I'm there, I'm waiting, I'm playing, trying to keep my chops warm, the phone rings. Meet me at 712 West 71st Street.
Oh, you still remember the address?
Yeah. Wait in the lobby. So I go, I wait in the lobby, I'm sitting there, and I see this long steel gray limo pull up. And I see Vince get out, Miles' nephew. And then I see Miles get out. And he's walking up to me, and Vince looks at Miles, he looks at me, he says, Miles, Daryl, Miles. Miles looks at me, he looks at Vince, he looks at me, he looks at Vince. He says, Vince, it's a weird looking dude.
Vince, this is a weird looking dude.
Oh. So we go upstairs to the apartment, and I pull out my bass, and Miles says, the first thing that Miles says to me, on the way up in the elevator, I'm chewing gum, and Miles looks at me and says, give me a stick of gum. I said, I'm chewing my last piece, I'm sorry. He said, you mean you came all the way to New York and you only brought one stick of gum? So, but before I picked that, and I think what he was trying to just kind of, make me comfortable. And before I picked up the bass when we got in the apartment, he said, listen, if I don't dig the way you play, it doesn't mean you can't play. It just means that I'm looking for something different. For a guy like him to be taking that much care of me before I even played a note, really, it signaled the kind of relationship that I ended up having with him. So I played, and he says, can you play B-flat blues? I said, sure, So I start playing, and he grabs the bass, he stops, and he says, can you play it real slow? And I said, oh, yeah, sure, So I start playing it real slow, and he grabs the bass again, he says, no, I mean real slow. So I'm playing it real slow, and I'm, B-flat blues are real slow, no problem, Play, and he has me play along with some of the tapes that tapes of gigs and stuff. You don't have to play have to play what's there, just play something that you would play in that situation, So I'm playing along, and him and Vince leave and go into the back, back of the apartment, and Vince comes back out and says, yo, man, you got it. And I'm like, no. I want him to tell me. So Miles comes out and, he hits me in the shoulder and says, you got it. So that's my, that's the story of
That's a good Miles Davis story. Jerry, you got to talk about Elvis.
No? Okay, so I got to take this face off.
Uh-oh. Everybody get comfortable.
Let me hand this back here.
Yeah.
Here I go.
Yeah, because I have to stand up to tell this story. Like a stand-up comic.
Now, well,
Yeah, Elvis liked to play practical jokes all the time. He'd throw water at people on the stage, and he didn't like people to play practical jokes on him. So one night, Ronnie Tutt, the drummer, and I, we were talking, and he had done something to Ronnie, played a joke on Ronnie or something. And I said, Ronnie, in the end of You've Got That Living Feeling, you know, when Elvis goes into it, he ends it with used to end it with a real angry thing, and he'd do all these karate chops and stuff, and then he'd bring his hand up and he'd bring it down, and then the whole orchestra would just go, you know. So I said, what do you think Elvis would do if, when he brought, after all the karate chops and everything, by the way, while he was doing the karate chop, Ronnie Teller would be playing, it would be this big scene, you know. So I said, what do you think he'd do if, when he brought his hand down, if nobody played anything? And Ronnie said, well, how about boop, and the cymbal, you know. So yeah, that's it. You know. We did it. we were in Las Vegas at the Hilton, and he got out there at the end of the song, and Level Field, he's going through all his karate chops and everything, and he goes, dink. And he stayed there. He just stayed there. And all of a sudden, he looked back at him like, if you don't play it this time, I'm going to kill you. And so then it was like, well, I'm going to do this one more time, and we better do it. So we're all looking at each other like, should we do it again? We think, nah, we better. And then when he brought his hand down, we played, you know, huge chorus. He never, ever mentioned it. Like it never happened, you know? Yeah.
Nice. Bob, you got something you'd like to share with us?
Well, I probably already shared it on the radio show the other night, but really for sheer entertainment, you know, Barnum and Bailey, three-ring circus entertainment, you couldn't really top John Lennon on his Lost Weekend with Phil Spector producing. I remember walking down the hall with A&M, and it's one of my earliest sessions. I hadn't been playing on too many records, so I was nervous to begin with. I got a call from Phil's office to come play, and, you know, John Lennon, I was, well, this is going to be a lot of fun, or really, I thought it was just going to be a lot of fun and amazing. Well, the first thing I do when I walk down the hall, the musicians are kind of, you know, having coffee out in the hallway. He's got, Phil Spector's got a three-piece suit on. He's got name tags, you know, little stick-on name tags for everyone. He takes a look at me, you know, probably, maybe just figures I'm Jewish. He gives me Adolf Eichmann. So I'm Adolf Eichmann for the week. He said, I want you to keep that on all night. Well, whatever. So anyway, you know, we're recording, and I also had, I had just bought a little pig nose amp. Remember pig nose amps for guitar players? Well, I just thought it was really cute. It was something, I mean, they sound like shit for bass, but, you know, I had it there, and I thought it would be something I could plug into and, you know, maybe play real quiet or something while people were tuning up or, you know, figuring out a part or whatever. I don't even know why I brought it. It was cute. You know, it was like having a new little woman having a new handbag or something. I don't really know, but I brought it, and he saw that thing and had, oh, go mic that thing up. He told the engineer to mic it up, and that's what I played through for them. That's kind of why it sounds like shit. he had the engineer, who was, the assistant engineer was Jimmy Iovine. I don't know if you know who he is. He's the chairman of Interscope Records now, but he was the assistant engineer. But anyway, you know, one of the funny stories on the session, you know, we were recording, and Phil, you know, is getting warm, I guess, in the control room. We're all out in the studio, and he takes his coat off, and he's got his vest on, and he's got his shoulder holster on, and Jesse Ed Davis, the guitar player, just looked over at me, and he said, oh boy, you better tune up, Bob. So anyway, I said it the other night, but that whole circus was hard to top, really.
Now,
for me.
Now, I just met these guys today, but by all accounts, Duck, you have about 8 gajillion stories.
Yeah. And I freeze up right now. I can give you, it's not as funny as that story, but a Belushi story. We, Blues Brothers band, closed the winter in San Francisco. Winterland. We closed that with the Grateful Dead. Now, you all know, there know that you're going to get dosed, you know. so Belushi kept warning the band, don't. He had us backstage, wouldn't let us out in backstage, wouldn't let nobody bring anything in, you know. And so come to find out, he got dosed. they put it through a champagne cork, and Belushi got dosed. Well, after that, we went to a party up at the Jefferson Airplane House, you know, and there's all kind of crazy stuff going on there. But my wife and I, June, we rode with Judy and John in the car to go to the party. So John gets there, and I see him standing over in the corner, just quiet John Belushi, quiet as he could be. These people started walking by, and John says, Duck, he says, isn't everybody dressed nice? And I said, John, you need to take more acid.
Nice.
I've never seen him. He's usually just outgoing and crazy as he can be. He was just subtle as I've never seen him.
The first endorsement of acid you'll ever hear. All right, Joe, finish us out strong. You got some nice stories, nice studio stories, something?
Problem was sitting on the end, man. No, I don't know. It's playing sessions is, you run into all kinds of producers. They all have their own idea about what you ought to do. And sometimes they know, and most times they don't. But I read this one producer in Nashville. He'd always show up drunk and then continue to party and never bothered anybody about what to play. But he was involved with a lot of hit records. So I was going to ask him a question one night about what he thought I should play on a song. I said, I could go to a pattern like this or like this. And he had his drink, and he looked real serious for a second. And he said, man, if you don't know what to play, we're in big trouble. He was one of the easy ones, yeah.
Is that the way it happens a lot? You walk into the studio, it just happens, you meld?
Oh, yeah, well, especially with people that you work with a lot, that sort of thing sort of grows and keeps happening and gets better. The just instinctive playing, yeah. Of course, whoever's in charge of the session always gives us that basic thing to start with,
And at that point,
was that the question?
Oh no, I just want your thoughts. There's we're free-forming right now. Duck, why don't you work with these guys, try and figure out a groove and give us some nice link up.
Oh my God.
Don't do what I did.
Yeah, I can't. You ever felt like the world was a tuxedo and you was a brown pair of shoes? I don't know.
All kinds of eye contact. All kinds of eye contact and clearly all kinds of listening. And that's something that obviously needs to be done when you're in the studio, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that probably listening is, is one of the most important things. It's one of the most. You got to listen. It's a whole nother art. It's a whole nother. It's a part of playing, but it's this whole other thing that it's got to be done. It's got to be done.
You're just kind of mixing. You're mixing in your head when you're hearing everybody. You got to be aware of what everybody else is doing. That's true.
So.
No.
Let's be honest. Yeah, that was something that I don't know why when he started playing immediately I went to what is he trying to do there? What does he feel that he's playing? Right. And the first thing I got was shuffle.
I didn't hear you. I was just watching his flip. It was wild when you started playing that because I went, well, that kind of almost did.
It did, but I was thinking about more what was his intention.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, that's a very valuable lesson right there.
There you go.
And you're never gonna always get it right. There's gonna be times when you hear something away. I've had people count out things to me, and they start playing, and I think, what time signature is that? And it's in 4. You know what I mean? But it's just, for some reason, so that's a very good example of how sometimes you're not on the same page. You know what I mean? But it's like a beacon to be listened for. You know, when you're playing with a drummer, you know, as a bass player, you're playing with a drummer. I mean, I always have to look around. If everybody's at the show last night, it's like the look that you give the guy. For me, that's like you're coming together and you start to like to meld. You're trying to like find some common ground, so that some real interaction is going on. And I don't mean interaction where I just mean interaction of just the pocket. You know what I mean? So that's,
And
you know,
it's not just your ears, it's your eyes and oftentimes your mouth.
exactly.
You know, it's all about communication.
Lips, your teeth, your tongue.
Wait just a second. I just want to say something. You know, I always listen to whoever's the focal point. Most of the time, it's the vocalist, the singer, the phrasing, and the song that dictates the feel, you know? So when I listen to going to do a session, I always listen to that, you know, and that's where the feel goes. Now, a lot of times, drummers, different people, they don't listen to that thing. In this case, it was Duck, you know, it was his thing. He was the focal point, you know. But that's to really get a song or whatever it is, a feel to come out, you know. That's the trick for me, you know, is to listen to that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. When you're with a singer, besides the rhythm section group, yeah.
That's why Otis Redding was so great. I mean, you had to listen. If you didn't listen to Otis Redding, you're crazy.
Rhythm of his vocal.
Yeah. And one other thing, I don't know if I guess one of the best lessons I ever got in my life was Al Jackson. You know, he could, you know, he'd say, done. You know, he called it done. And he'd say, wait on two. And I said, well, you know, when I play two, you play. And it kind of works out a little bit that way, like in Midnight Hour. You know, I think that it kept me simpler. And you know, that's all I know. Just simplicity.
One of the guys who sang last night said something to me very interesting in the dressing room. Nick Tremulous. He was talking about the backbeat, and he was saying that the producer talking about the dance, the jerk. Was that?
That was Jerry Wexler. Yeah.
Okay, that was Jerry Wexler, and he was saying that the drummer's playing about because you can play on 2 and 4, and it still doesn't mean that it's really. So he was telling the drummer. He's telling the drummer, like, I want it to feel like that dance, the jerk. You know what I mean? Like that. And so that creates a difference. It's different than just, when you add that to it, then I mean, it's all like grease in there.
Delayed.
You know what I mean? And it just sets it back in a way where, okay, now that's feeling a different way. You know what I mean? And these little things that you might not at first be aware of, they are things to pay attention to. So that when you play with a drummer, the feel is there, you know? I remember in high school playing with all of these drummers that were in the orchestra. And then there was a guy that played with the marching band, but he's also a drummer. Also a set drummer. And this guy came in and played Valdez in the Country. It's a Donny Hathaway tune. And I thought that all the guys in the orchestra were like the greatest drummers. Right up until I heard him play. And suddenly, there was just this feeling, you know, that you gotta pay attention to, you gotta, key in on it. It's not like, oh, I gotta pay attention to the feel, it's like you gotta breathe in it and let it kind of, come on you, and that's, when you find that with a drummer, it's like, right there next to good sex. Right? You know what I mean?
But it's better than bad sex.
Yeah, it sure is.
It's more fun you can have with your clothes on.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
There's an exercise that you can do.
Things that I thought were really interesting and different about yours is you were doing a lot of pickups. Yeah. And you guys, I don't know if you picked up on that, but it sounded like you did, And another thing I thought was kind of interesting is about like the third chorus, maybe you kind of got a little quieter.
Well, because I was playing too fucking loud.
Oh.
But I did want to
See, I was about to make this wonderful point.
I don't know how many singers I've played with told me that.
What do you mean dynamics? I'm playing as loud as I can.
But I swear to God, instinctively, I wanted to play kind of a similar thing that Doug played. I didn't want to do the same, the same stuff. Oh, it's different. It's just different,
Exactly, it's just different.
I like skipping.
With skipping like that, I always think of a Hammond organ player.
You would sounded exactly like a guy playing keyboard bass. I was listening going, damn, that sounds like organ.
Well,
it sounded
nice
just
of you to
like
say.
organ.
But that's what I think
like
of,
organ
how
bass,
they
man.
go, they hit the quarters with the foot,
Yeah.
and they go, or opposite. Some guys do it like
Yeah,
that.
right.
Where they play one,
Yeah. No, when you started playing, I was like, that sounds it feels like.
Yeah,
It feels like
that was-
an organ player playing bass.
that was probably a big influence on me, like Jack McDuff and Jimmy Smith, and that style of bass playing. That's why I like those K basses and the hollow body, even though I play Fender, Lakland basses, but, Fender style basses. I was like that K bass because it has that sound, hollow body basses,
Right.
kind of just instinctively. So I just turned my, I had the no treble on when I'm just playing, and it kind of gives it that sound,
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
When
Right on the mark.
When I first learned the first band we was in, trying to put together a band, we'd go play a groove like that all night long. Only thing we did was change keys. It was the same shit all night long. Just
Yeah, that's great.
Hey.
Learning that.
Jerry, pick up that bass and play anything but a shuffle.
Me in the double time meter, and then I realized the way it was phrased was such that I think the double time backbeat was the right thing. It's almost reggae-like, but the way you're pulling the one out on the phrasing, it's the pickup that that threw me the bone.
The middle part, that part, I always heard a.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Pick it up.
Really? Okay.
And then we'll go back into that halftime thing at the end.
Yeah, that would be one of those ideas that I wouldn't have thought of, and then, that happens quite often in the studio. You don't get a chance.
Yeah, I made a joke of when, you said, well, you played quieter.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make light of when I started playing quieter, you guys came down too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to just make a joke out of the whole situation.
But it was a funny joke,
We're
so
all
it's
listening
okay.
to each other. Well, yeah, comedy is king, basically.
Thank you and good night. All right, the last thing we're going to do here is, which apparently a couple of you guys are dreading. Gary wrote out a set of chord changes and a field. We're going to have 4 of you guys leave the room. One of you's going to hang out, and you're going to come up with a bass line for this tune, and then someone else is going to come in and come up with a bass line for the same tune. And I just want to hear what each of you guys do with this song. Yeah, right. Basically, it's a game show. So, who wants to be the first victim?
Do we get to date them after?
Somebody on one hand is first.
Let's make him go first. Okay, cool. I got the game.
They can ask questions all at the open house individually.
Yeah, we'll have the open house in about 45 minutes, and you can, corner them and ask them anything you want to. But let's have some applause. This was wonderful. And also some thanks for Gary Palmer and Larry Beers. I'm Alan Bolcher, and thanks to Dan Megan for giving me the opportunity to share the stage with these guys. All right, thanks for coming.